I've been a police officer for just over 17 years. 17 years of late nights, bloody crime scenes, domestic disputes, drug busts, suicides, and the occasional miracle. I've seen people at their worst and sometimes at their most broken, but nothing. Not the shootings, not the standoffs, not even the 2 times I almost died, ever left me with the kind of fear that one address on our patrol route did. Bramblewood Lane. We all called it the house that wouldn't stay empty. I first responded there in 2014, about 4 years into my career. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when dispatch sent us to a welfare check on an elderly woman. Her daughter in another state hadn't heard from her in a week. The woman's name was Edith Mallory, and according to records, she'd lived in that same house for over 50 years. When we arrived, the yard was overgrown and the curtains drawn tight. There was a stack of mail by the front door and a smell, faint but unmistakable, leaking through the cracks. It was death. We forced entry and found Edith slumped in a rocking chair in the living room. Natural causes, according to the coroner. But that's not what unsettled me. It was her face. She looked terrified, eyes wide open, mouth frozen mid-scream. We closed the case and moved on. People die. It happens. But 3 months later, another call came from 147 Bramblewood. This time, the new owners, a young couple named Alan and Marissa, reported strange noises and break-ins. Someone was knocking on their windows at night, leaving doors open, whispering through the vents. We did 3 separate checks. Every time the house was empty. No signs of forced entry. No footprints, no tool marks, nothing. Then one night, Marissa called 911 screaming that someone was inside the house. When we got there, Alan was on the front lawn with a kitchen knife in his hand, shaking uncontrollably. Marissa was gone. They found her body in the attic 3 days later and strangled, no signs of sexual assault or theft. The autopsy said the time of death was within minutes of the 911 call, but we were there within 2 minutes. No one had seen anyone leave. Alan was a suspect at first, but he passed every polygraph, and there was 0 evidence tying him to it. He left town after that and never came back. The house sat empty again. You'd think after a murder the property would stay vacant. But 6 months later, a new family moved in, the Parkers. They had 2 kids and a dog, and they seemed like good people. They lasted 3 weeks. Their first call was about someone knocking on their daughter's window at 2 a.m. We found small smudge marks on the glass, like fingerprints dragged downward, but too long, too thin, to be human. Their second call was about footsteps in the attic. When we checked, the dust was disturbed, but there was no one up there. Their third call was the worst. It came in at 1:47 a.m. "There's a man in the hallway," Mr. Parker whispered. "He's standing outside our bedroom door." We raced there. Cleared the house top to bottom. Nothing. But the security camera they'd installed caught something. At 1:46:53, a figure appears in the upstairs hallway. Tall, thin, no facial features. It stands motionless for 7 seconds, then fades. Not walks. Fades out of frame. The Parkers moved out the next morning. After that, the house sat empty for nearly 2 years. Even the banks couldn't sell it. But we still got calls, from neighbors mostly. Lights turning on at night. Curtains shifting. Voices coming from inside. We always checked. We always found nothing. By 2019, the address was a running joke at the precinct. "You draw the Bramblewood call, rookie. Bring salt and holy water." That kind of thing. Then one night, I got a call from dispatch I'll never forget. Unit 27, respond to 147 Bramblewood. Caller reports a child locked inside. A child. When I arrived, the front door was wide open, swinging gently in the wind. My partner Jensen covered the perimeter while I entered. "Sheriff's Department." I called out. "Hello?" The house was silent. Dusty. Cold. It smelled like mildew and earth. Then I heard it. A faint sobbing. Upstairs. I followed the sound to a bedroom at the end of the hall. The door was cracked, the sobs clearer now. It was definitely a child, and maybe 6 or 7, crying softly. I pushed the door open. Empty. The crying stopped instantly. The room was bare. No furniture, no toys. Just a single footprint, small, barefoot, wet, in the middle of the wooden floor. I called for Jensen. He didn't answer. "Jensen, where are you?" No response. I made my way downstairs, heart hammering. The front door was closed now, and at the base of the staircase something was written on the wall. "Get out." It wasn't paint. It was moisture smeared like condensation from invisible fingers. Then I heard Jensen shouting from outside. I kicked open the door. He was standing by the cruiser, pale as chalk. "I saw someone," he said, trembling. "A kid." He was watching me from the upstairs window. "There's no one in there," I said. "We searched every room, every closet. The crawl space, the attic, nothing, no child. No footprints, nothing." But the next day, when we reviewed my body cam footage, the audio caught something. Right before I opened that bedroom door and right when the crying stopped, a voice whispered, clear as day, "Please don't leave me here." That was supposed to be my last call to 147 Bramblewood. I told myself I'd never step foot in that place again. But in 2022, we got a call that changed everything. A construction crew was tearing down the house to make way for new development. They'd made it halfway through when they hit something buried beneath the basement floor. A crawl space. Inside were 5 skeletons. 2 adults. 3 children. The medical examiner estimated they'd been there for at least 40 years. The cause of death: strangulation. One of the children, based on dental records, was Edith Mallory's son, reported missing in 1969. She'd never told anyone he even existed. They demolished what was left of the house. The lot's empty now, but neighbors still call from time to time. They say they hear knocking from under the dirt. They say they see a boy standing where the front door used to be. They say they hear a woman's voice crying for help. And every now and then, dispatch still gets a call from that address. Always the same words. Always the same voice, "Please don't leave me here." I've worked in law enforcement long enough to know that most haunted place stories are just that. Stories. You spend a decade or two dealing with real violence, real trauma, real evil, and you stop believing in the kind that hides under beds. At least, that's what I thought, until the Tunnel 9 case. The call came in on a cold November night in 2021. I was working the night shift with my partner, Detective Carla Ruiz, when dispatch told us to check out a report of a possible body near the old Sunderland rail tunnel, about 8 miles outside town. Tunnel 9 had been abandoned for nearly 60 years, since a derailment back in 1963 killed 27 people. They sealed it off soon after and rerouted the line. Since then, it had become a magnet for ghost hunters, graffiti kids, and the occasional drug deal. We expected to find either nothing at all, or maybe a drunk teenager. Instead, we found Thomas Keller. Keller was a local, mid-40s, reported missing 3 days earlier. We found his body about 50 feet inside the tunnel entrance and fully clothed, no signs of a struggle. But his face was twisted in a way I'll never forget. Eyes bulging, mouth locked wide open, hands clutched over his ears. The coroner's report later ruled it cardiac arrest. But Keller had no history of heart problems, and the terror frozen on his face didn't look like any heart attack I'd ever seen. We closed the scene, filed the paperwork, and moved on. But 3 weeks later, another body turned up, same spot, same condition, then another. 4 bodies in 5 weeks. All with the same expression, all with hands over their ears. Something was happening inside Tunnel 9. We set up a surveillance operation in December. Motion sensors, cameras, thermal imaging. The works, nothing. No movement, no animals. No signs of foul play. But every single night, between 2 and 2:20 a.m., the audio recorders captured something, a low, rhythmic murmuring. Not words exactly, but voices. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. When audio techs tried to enhance the sound, they discovered something even stranger. Each voice seemed to be speaking in a different language. Some modern, some long dead. One linguist swore he heard fragments of Latin funeral prayers. Another thought it sounded like old Germanic incantations. We brushed it off. Probably echoes, we said. Wind currents. A weird quirk of acoustics. But then one night, Carla and I decided to go in ourselves. It was December 19th, 2021. Temperature just above freezing. No wind, no rain. We parked by the fence line and walked the quarter-mile trail to Tunnel 9 under a cold, cloudless sky. I remember the entrance looking like a black wound in the hillside, 30 feet high, lined with rotting brick, tagged with graffiti and rust. My flashlight barely penetrated the darkness inside. We stepped over the do not enter barrier and walked in. The deeper we went, the colder it got. And quieter. The air itself felt thick like walking underwater. About 50 yards in, the last traces of moonlight vanished behind us. Carla stopped and looked around. "You feel that?" I did. The walls were humming. It wasn't sound. Not exactly. More like vibration. Faint but constant. Like the whole tunnel was alive and breathing. "Probably trains," I said, even though I knew no trains had used this tunnel in 60 years. Then we heard it. A voice. Soft, distant, echoing from deeper within. A man's voice repeating the same word over and over. "Come." We froze. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12, I said into the radio. "We have possible contact in the tunnel, investigating." Static. I tried again. Nothing. The radio was dead. Carla's light caught something on the wall. Deep scratches gouged into the brick. Forming letters, I hear them, we pressed on. The voice grew louder, joined by others. A woman sobbing. A child laughing. A chorus whispering in languages I didn't recognize. Carla grabbed my arm. "We need to leave." I wanted to agree, but something pulled me forward. It wasn't curiosity. It was more like compulsion. Like I had to go deeper. 50 yards later, we reached the old collapse site, a pile of twisted rail and stone from the 1963 derailment. The bodies had been recovered long ago, but the wreckage was still there, and so was someone else. He was standing just beyond the debris, barefoot, shirtless, eyes glassy and unfocused. "Sir?" I called. "Police!" "Are you hurt?" He didn't answer. He just turned and walked deeper into the darkness. We followed. We didn't even discuss it. It was like our bodies moved before our minds could catch up. Then, maybe 30 yards later, he disappeared. Not ran, not hid, just gone, and the voices, the hundreds of voices, stopped. Silence. Then from directly behind us, someone whispered my name. I spun around. No one there. Carla was breathing hard. "I heard it too," she said. We started backing up slowly, weapons drawn. Every instinct screamed at me to get out. But as we turned to leave, the beam of my flashlight fell on something carved into the wall. A name. Thomas Keller. The man we'd found dead weeks earlier. Below it were 3 more names. The other victims. And below those, 2 new ones. Carla Ruiz, David Marin, my name. Her name. Freshly carved. We ran. We didn't stop until we were back in the patrol car. I don't even remember how we got there. All I know is that we didn't speak for the entire drive back. The department launched a formal investigation the next day. Tunnel 9 was sealed with reinforced steel and posted with no trespassing signs. They even considered filling it in entirely, but it didn't matter, because 3 nights later the motion sensors we left behind triggered at 2:11 a.m. The cameras showed nothing. But the audio captured a man's voice, crystal clear, whispering 2 words. "Welcome back, that was over 3 years ago. I transferred precincts not long after." Carla quit the force altogether. She said she still hears the voices sometimes, usually when she's falling asleep. I don't tell many people this, but every now and then, I hear them too. Faint, distant, like they're calling from far underground. And last month, when I drove past the overgrown path that leads to Tunnel 9, I saw something scratched into the steel barrier. It was a single word. Fresh, clean, recent. Come. I've worked in law enforcement for almost 20 years, and I've seen my share of horrors. Murders, overdoses, suicides, domestic abuse. Things you don't ever forget, no matter how much you drink or how hard you try. But nothing, and I mean nothing, ever got under my skin like the 6B case. It started out as one of those routine welfare checks, the kind we handle a dozen times a month. But what happened inside that apartment has haunted me ever since. I don't talk about it on the job anymore. Most of the guys would just laugh, or worse. They'd think I've lost my mind, but I know what I saw. I know what I heard, and I'll carry it with me until the day I die. It was the night of April 3rd, 2022, a cold, windy Thursday. I was on patrol in the South District, the older, rougher part of town, when dispatch sent me a call. Unit 22, respond to 414 Lockwood Street, apartment 6B. Neighbors reporting screams and loud banging for over an hour. Caller says it stopped 15 minutes ago, but no one's answering the door. It didn't sound like much. Probably a domestic dispute, maybe a drunk argument. I dealt with worse 100 times. I radioed back, 10-4 en route, and headed over. The building was one of those decaying pre-war apartment blocks. 5 stories, peeling paint, iron railings that creaked under your boots. It reeked of cigarettes, mildew, and desperation. I climbed the stairs to the 6th floor, past flickering lights and broken mailboxes. The hallway was silent. Too silent. Usually in a place like that, you'd hear a TV somewhere, music thumping through a wall, somebody yelling. That night, nothing. I stopped outside 6B. The door was old and weathered, the paint chipped and flaking. No sound came from inside. I knocked. Police, anyone home? No answer. I knocked again, harder. This is the police. We need to speak with whoever's inside. Still nothing. I pressed my ear to the door. At first I heard only silence. Then faintly, like a whisper, weeping. A woman's weeping. I radioed for backup, but was told the nearest unit was at least 15 minutes away. Against my better judgment, I decided to go in alone. I tried the handle. Locked. So I pulled out the universal key we carry for welfare checks. Basically a thin piece of metal designed to trip cheap locks. It worked like a charm. The door swung open. The smell hit me first. It was like damp wood. Rotten fruit and something else, something old, like the inside of a tomb. The apartment was dark except for a weak light flickering from the kitchen. Furniture was overturned. Picture frames lay shattered on the floor. A single plate was broken in the doorway, its shards scattered like teeth. "Police!" I called out. "Is anyone here?" The weeping stopped. I moved cautiously down the hallway, hand resting on my holster. Every step creaked. Every sound echoed. The air felt heavier the deeper I went, like the walls themselves were pressing in. I turned into the living room and froze. Someone had painted symbols on the walls. Hundreds of them. Circles, eyes, unfamiliar markings that twisted and spiraled. Some were drawn in black paint, others in what looked like dried blood. And then I saw her. She was standing in the far corner of the room, barefoot in a long white nightgown that looked older than she was. Her hair was tangled and matted, hanging over her face. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Are you okay? Did someone hurt you?" She didn't respond. "Ma'am, I'm with the police. I need you to show me your hands and tell me if anyone else is here." Slowly, she turned her head. Her eyes were black. Not just dark, completely black. No iris, no white, just endless void. And when she smiled, it wasn't a human smile. It was too wide, too knowing. Then, in a voice that sounded like 1,000 whispers layered on top of each other, she said, "You shouldn't have come here." I drew my weapon and backed toward the door. My training screamed at me to leave, but my feet wouldn't move. I couldn't take my eyes off her. She started walking toward me. Slow, deliberate steps that made no sound. "Stay where you are," I shouted. "Do not move." She didn't stop, and then, just as she stepped into the faint light, she vanished. I don't mean she ran. I don't mean she ducked into another room. I mean 1 second she was there and the next she was gone. I radioed for backup again, my voice shaking. No response. Static. That's when the lights went out. The apartment plunged into total darkness, and I heard it. Whispering. Not from one voice, but many. Coming from every corner of the room. "You shouldn't have come here. He's watching. She remembers. It's too late." I swept my flashlight across the walls. Empty. Across the hallway, empty. Across the floor, and there she was again, not standing this time. Crawling. Her joints bent the wrong way. Her limbs twisted like a spider's. She scuttled across the floor impossibly fast, until she was inches from my boots. I fired once, twice. The shots echoed through the apartment, but she didn't fall. She didn't even flinch. She just stared up at me with those black, bottomless eyes. Then she whispered something I'll never forget. "You were here before." I bolted out of the room, heart hammering. But the hallway was different. Longer. Narrower. Doors I hadn't seen before lined the walls. Each one was numbered 6B. I tried the stairwell and it wasn't there. Tried the elevator, gone. My radio, my phone, my watch. All dead. And then I noticed something worse. The apartment door was gone too. It was as if the hallway had sealed itself shut. The whispers grew louder, closer. I could feel breath on my neck, cold fingers brushing my shoulder. But when I turned around, the hallway was empty, and then ahead of me, a single door opened. Slowly, silently. I don't know why I walked toward it. I don't know why I stepped inside. Maybe I wasn't in control anymore. Maybe I never had been. Inside was a bedroom, small, dusty, a single bed, an old rocking chair, a broken mirror, and on the far wall in a photo, it was me, younger, uniform pressed, badge shining, standing in front of this very building. The date on the frame, April 3rd, 2012, 10 years earlier. I didn't remember ever being here before, but there I was, smiling like I belonged. Then I heard it again, the weeping. Coming from the closet, I approached slowly, gun drawn. The door creaked as I opened it. Inside was a chair, and tied to that chair was a corpse, long dead, nothing left but mummified skin and hollow sockets. A woman wearing the same nightgown as the one I'd seen earlier, and carved into the inside of the closet door in deep, jagged letters. Welcome back. I don't remember leaving. I don't remember calling for help. All I know is that backup found me standing outside the building 20 minutes later, weapon drawn, shaking and incoherent. But here's the part that still keeps me up at night. Apartment 6B didn't exist. There was no 6th floor. The building only had 5, and yet my body cam footage, the footage they confiscated and sealed away, shows me walking down a 6th floor hallway for nearly 40 minutes. Shows me talking to a woman no one else could see. Shows me staring at a photograph that's never been found. The footage ends abruptly. One frame I'm inside the apartment. The next I'm standing outside on the street, looking up at a building with 5 floors. I took a leave of absence after that. I tried therapy, religion, even hypnosis. Nothing explains what happened. But sometimes late at night I still hear the weeping. Sometimes I wake up standing at my apartment door, hand on the knob, like I'm about to step into 6B again. And 2 months ago, I got an envelope in the mail, no return address. Inside was a photograph. It was me, standing in a hallway lined with doors, and on the back in messy black ink, 3 words, "See you soon."